Greta Gerwig's adaptation of Little Women pays an honorable tribute to its classic source material. The Two Popes continues Netflix's winning streak of theatrical film releases, and Cats turns out to be the dumpster fire we were all expecting it to be. I'm Joe Acierno, this is Real Talk. Okay, welcome to now what is the second episode of Real Talk. It's been a busy weekend for me. I got a chance to see not one, not two, but three different movies over the last couple days. Not sure how exactly to feel about myself after that one, but you know what? I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to go on with the show. First, what we're going to do is we're going to review Cats, which, just believe everything you're hearing about it. That's all I'm going to say. After that, we're going to go into Deadpool 3. Ryan Reynolds actually confirmed that it is in the works at Marvel Studios. I know there was a bit of a confusion after the whole Fox and Disney merger as to what exactly the fate of that franchise is going to be. After that, we're going to go and review The Two Popes. Then we are going to discuss my final predictions for the 92nd Academy Award nominations in the minor categories. And then we're going to finish off the show by reviewing Little Women. So, Cats. When I told people that I was going to go and see Cats this past weekend, everyone's answers and responses seemed to be the same. Why? Why? Why would you do something like that? Well, the reason why is that I heard that it wasn't getting the best reviews. Everyone seems to be tearing it a new one. And I figured, you know what? Let me get in on the fun. And I know that might not be the best way to go into a movie because, of course, no matter what you're hearing, you always have to go in and make your own expectations because you may end up liking it more than everyone else is saying. That's how I felt about Star Wars. Reviews on that were kind of, a little bit up in the air. But, I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. And on that note, that was not the case with Cats at all. This movie is a total shitstorm, and I'm being nice when I describe it as that. I'm going to do my best to describe exactly what the story is for those who don't know the storyline behind the original Broadway musical that it's based on. Because honestly, I didn't really know what it was based on, what the storyline was until very recently. And I'm going to see if I can get it to you guys somehow. So basically, the story follows an abandoned cat who encounters another tribe of cats after being, just tossed away. And all of these cats are about to go to some kind of ball where they all perform and they get a chance to get picked by this, I guess, guru, deity kind of cat, named Old Deuteronomy. I really don't know what else to call her. And whoever she feels is the most worthy is the one that gets to go into the Heaviside layer, which I'm assuming is like a nirvana for cats. And how they prove whether or not they're worthy enough basically involves an American Idol, America's Got Talent type of show that would appeal mostly to furries. So that's a bit of a handful. And just so before I get into my overall feelings about this movie, let me just say what actually I kind of liked at least a little bit. Jennifer Hudson plays the character Grisabella. Can't tell you exactly what she is, what her character is, other than she's not liked by any of the other cats. And her rendition of the classic song Memory, that was actually phenomenal. Jennifer Hudson is a wonderful singer. She's a great performer. Again, I think all the performers in this movie did the most with what they could, but that's a different topic. But Jennifer Hudson, I gotta say, did very, very well with her rendition of the song. There's an original song in this film called "Beautiful Ghosts" that actually was pretty good. I don't have anything bad to say about that song. There are a couple times throughout the hour and 49-minute movie where I chuckled a tiny bit, and that's about all that works in this movie. I had such a hard time just trying to keep interest in this movie because what was the vast majority of the movie just didn't make any freaking sense. And the things that did make sense were just too strange for me to like. And I can't say I'm the kind of guy that, if something is just a bit weird in a film that I'm automatically not going to like it. That's not me at all. But when it just came to this, it's just that kind of strange that it was with the sort of confusion and absurdity that came with the rest of the movie. It just left a very, very bad taste in my mouth. And I gotta say, the execution of this movie was just terrible. Absolutely terrible. And I look at the pedigree behind this movie. You know, Tom Hooper is a great, great director. He did The King's Speech. He did the new Les Mis movie, which I love the second film more than anything. But with this one, not gonna lie, I don't know what the hell he was thinking. You know, I think you would expect a lot more from a man with an Academy Award for Best Director under his belt. But it just wasn't done well at all. And again, I don't know how much you could do with this particular musical, because I think this is all just a little bit too strange to be adapted into a movie when the Broadway show was kind of, and yeah, it's been running for a while, but the show has been very polarizing across audiences. You have some people who love it, but most of the people I talk to think it's so stupid. They hate it. I remember I asked my mom for the first time when I heard about this movie coming out. I said, "Oh, Mom, what's the storyline? What's Cats actually about?" She's just like, "Yeah, it's stupid." And that was most of the answer that I got from her. It's stupid. And you know what? She ended up being 1,000% right. So the execution of this is terrible. The motions and actions of everyone just trying to act like cats, and it just didn't sit well with me. It just didn't hit my eye the right way. I think everyone trying to act like cats just came off so strange, just came off so weird and cringy, and it just didn't, oh my god, I just don't have like enough bad things I have too many bad things to say about this movie. But going back to the performers, what I will say is that Ian McKellen's in this movie, and again, this movie does a great job of wasting its cast that it's somehow managed to get a great hand on, but Ian McKellen's in this movie, and while I will say that, of course, he, like everybody else in this movie, either comes off flat or just really weird in the worst way possible, he was actually very committed to being a cat. And as much as everything in this movie just didn't seem to go right in just about every single department, I can't help but admire the amount of dedication he had to just playing a feline. It's I got to give him credit for that. But on top of just the acting just kind of being just everything just being all across the board, the thing that probably stands out the most in terms of just pure horror, just bad, just terrible, just bad, was the CGI. Now, I remember when the trailer first came out, and everyone panned the CGI. They panned how everyone looked as humanoid cats. And I can at least say that I was a bit intrigued by it. I'm like, okay, if they're gonna do this, is this the best that they would do with this? Honestly, I don't know. I remember thinking to myself, okay, maybe this doesn't look bad, but after watching the movie, I'm like, I don't know what the hell I was thinking there. But that's not even the worst part in terms of the CGI. The worst part in terms of CGI was that this $95 million movie was not finished rendering the visual effects before releasing it into theaters nationwide. I'm sure that I'm not going to be the first person to say this, but if you Google Judi Dench wedding ring cats, you are going to see a picture of Judi Dench's unfinished cat hands in the film, in the final cut of the film, with her wedding ring still on it. I mean, unless cats wear wedding rings with human hands in that universe, just how do you do that? How do you do that? That doesn't make any sense. I guarantee you that I know I'm being really hard, but honestly, there are so many people out there that want to do film projects, that wish that they had the money that this movie had behind it. I guarantee you that if you gave most other people $95 million to make a movie that wasn't Cats, it would have been 10 times better than this. But no, this movie was a total disaster. When it wasn't being strange or it's being confusing, honestly, I just had a hard time I just had a hard time paying attention to it and not thinking about other things. Towards the end of the movie, I was more focused on catching my train going home than I was in actually staying to the end. I almost left because I'm like, oh, my train's coming up, and the next one doesn't come for another 10 minutes after that. I wouldn't have been willing to wait for another 10 or 20 minute train after just to finish this movie. But, I did, because I figured, what, I should stay for the entire movie. And I remember there was one part throughout the screening of the film where a bunch of really obnoxious kids came in, they started making like a lot of noise and whatnot, yelling and cursing. I guess they weren't told no very much when they were younger by their parents, but they started like making all kinds of noise, and everyone's telling them to shut up. One of them screams back, "Oh, I'll suck my dick." A really really nice kid. Parents are doing a great job with him. Like, "Oh, suck my dick," and then someone in the audience claps back at him and says, "You don't have one. That's why you're in here." And we all just started laughing. And I'm not gonna lie, that was the most interesting point of me watching this movie. Honestly, this has been such a catastrophe. This has been such a gigantic misfire of a movie. And I can't help but wonder, like, why they had to rush the film when the visuals weren't even done. Like, what were they waiting for exactly? Were they waiting for, like, the big Christmas time Oscar release? Because I guarantee you, this is not getting any awards at all, because Universal Pictures already cut this from its for your consideration page that, film studios use to promote their films to get awards and stuff like that. So they already cut Cats from their page. What are they going to think? They're like, oh, we need to get the big Christmas time release. Okay, $95 million into this movie. I believe the opening weekend for this film was somewhere around the $6.5 million area. So this movie was just a misfire on all fronts. So, just to finish this off, strange in the worst way possible, confusing, and downright incompetent. Cats is a cringe-filled adaptation of one of the most divisive Broadway musicals that's especially disappointing when compared to the director's previous work. I'm going to give Cats a 38. Okay, so moving on to a much, much brighter topic. Last time that Ryan Reynolds was on Live with Kelly and Michael, he confirmed that Deadpool 3 is in the works at Marvel. So that means that after the 20th Century Fox and Disney merger, or really, Disney buying 20th Century Fox, Deadpool is more than likely going to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, since 20th Century Fox owned the X-Men franchise, and Deadpool does operate in that particular universe. So there's a good chance that we may see Deadpool in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at some point down the line. Now, as far as the first two Deadpool films, I definitely enjoy them a lot. They're definitely very, very entertaining. I've seen the first one definitely much more than the second. And while the first one definitely feels the first of its kind, at least in a while, a lot of the cliches that it makes fun of, it kind of has in the film itself. Like the villain, Ajax. Yeah, Francis Ajax. He goes by both names. I thought he was absolutely insufferable. He annoys me every single time I watch the movie again, and he just goes on the screen. I thought he was a terrible, terrible villain, very one note. But again, the main reason to watch the movie is, of course, Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds is absolutely hilarious as the Merc with the Mouth, and the sequel, honestly, I think the sequel is better than the original. I think it just expanded on everything, showed Deadpool playing, not so nice with, even more of the X-Men, and it just expanded that world just a bit more. And it didn't feel like, this exactly the same as the first movie, which, I got to give it credit for. So when it comes to Deadpool 3, I'm definitely excited. I'm hoping that Disney, that since this is going to be a Disney film now, technically, that Deadpool is allowed to keep his, violent, gory, profanity-laced edge to him. I think there's a lot of promise there as long as they do it the right way. Of course, Ryan Reynolds has to be a huge part in this, and I think he's definitely committed to the idea. This has to have the right idea in order to keep going with the Deadpool franchise. And even that, there are only 2 films in the Deadpool franchise at the moment. I always think it's a little weird if they don't do a third. It kind of just feels like, something's unfinished there because everything out there is a trilogy. But again, as long as there's the right story progression behind making a third film, then I'm all for it. As long as Deadpool gets to keep what made him so likable, what separated him from so many other superhero films, then I'm all for this. Okay, next on the docket, we are going to review The Two Popes. The Two Popes is one of the newer Netflix film releases that follows the transition period in the Catholic Church leadership between the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, the first resignation in the papacy in about 700 years, and his transition from him being Pope to Pope Francis coming into the mainstream and taking up the leadership position. This film also shows the speculated conversations that these two men might have had in the lead up to the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. And the film is directed by Fernando Meirelles of City of God and The Constant Gardener. The film was penned by Anthony McCartan, who also wrote the screenplays for The Theory of Everything and Bohemian Rhapsody. He co-wrote the latter with Peter Morgan. And the film stars, of course, Jonathan Pryce as Pope Francis and Anthony Hopkins as Pope Benedict XVI. What I honestly loved about this film is that anyone who grew up in my area, and I think, I'm sure we're not the only ones, but I know there are a lot of people out there who had to go to religion classes when they were younger. And I remember going to those, and they were, for, excuse the pun, but they were boring as sin. I dreaded going to those. When I finally made my confirmation in the 7th grade and technically graduated from going to those classes, there haven't been a lot of happier moments in my life. Those classes were so freaking boring. Most of them took up my Saturday morning when I just wanted to sleep in, or maybe sleep over at my grandma's house the night before. But no, I had to go to religion. Which again, I see why my parents did it, but I never liked going to those classes. Case in point, before I ramble on too long. Watching this film was probably the most interesting, the most captivating, the most intriguing display of theological talk I've ever seen. The conversations and debates between these two men, who obviously care so much about their faith, are absolutely incredible. I never thought, if you told me back when I was in those religion classes that there would be something someday to actually make me care so much about theological debate and theological discussion, I wouldn't have believed you. Especially at St. John's, when I had to take not one, not two, but 3 different theology classes, because that, of course, is a Catholic university. Where was this film when I was in those classes? Honestly, if they had just shown what, I wish this film came out about a decade before it did, because I guarantee you that a lot of other theology and religion professors would have and could have shown this film to help make a point of some kind, or even just like an end of the year celebration. Because honestly, I thought this film was terrific. I thought it was very intriguing. I thought the dialogue in particular was very, very well done. There's something very snappy about it. It kind of has like an Aaron Sorkin feel to it with how snappy it is, but at the same time, it deals with a lot of high ideal concepts of religion and, scripture and text and just, theological principle. It was very, very interesting. On the surface, this movie might not come off as somewhat of a, of a blockbuster or really so much of a page turner if you're just reading the screenplay. But honestly, it was very, very well done. It was very, very interesting. And one of the things that stands out so much in this movie is the characterization of both Pope Francis and Pope Benedict XVI and how they put these two up together. These two, it's very weird. I definitely look at them as foils, but there are definitely overlaps in their personality that stand out. They almost have a low-key and subdued presence, at least on the surface, but then when you get into the more intimate conversations between the two of them, that's when the differences really start to come out. Of course, Pope Francis is the more liberal personality. He's definitely the more talkative out of the two of them, but of course, in his ideology, he's also more to the liberal side. And Pope Benedict is the same, but on the conservative side. He's definitely more reserved. He doesn't necessarily talk nearly as much. He doesn't open up nearly as much as, say, Pope Francis does. And I loved how this film put both conservative and liberal personalities and ideologies on display in the debates that they had. The only thing that I think may be kind of a negative for me, but again, it all depends on the actual history itself. This film is based very much on speculation because, of course, no one was actually there in the conversation between Pope Francis and Pope Benedict XVI, except for Pope Francis and Pope Benedict. And I think in this speculation, the scripting kind of tends to tip the favorability towards Pope Francis a bit more. And again, I'm not saying that I'm going into this saying Pope Benedict 2020 or anything like that. I just think that if you're someone who is very fond of Pope Benedict, you may notice that difference in balance towards Pope Francis. But again, maybe that's what they were trying to go for, and that Pope Francis at that time was, at least this is what the screenwriter might be saying, that Pope Francis was at the time the change that the church needed, because of course there was a lot of scandal going on up until the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. So other than that, that was just that one little thing that I noticed that I kind of threw me off just a little bit, but it definitely doesn't drag down the overall impact of this film. I gotta say, the performances from Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins. Jonathan Pryce plays Pope Francis basically in some ways and how I'd expect him to be, in other ways how I wouldn't expect him to be. The videos that I've seen of Pope Francis, he definitely seems like a very down-to-earth presence, down-to-earth, like, subdued but quiet, but of course, like, there's something very endearing about him. And then in the film, he's kind of played as this more talkative and more outgoing and friendly person, which I'm not doubting that's how he is in real life, but just coming from what I've seen from the video footage of him, it gave me a new perspective on Pope Francis. So I thought that was very interesting. And then, of course, Anthony Hopkins is terrific as Pope Benedict XVI. He's definitely, again, like I said before, he's the opposite of Pope Francis in a lot of ways. He's definitely more quiet. He's more, conservative. He's like more, this is how it's been. This is how it has to be. And they were both very, very interesting to watch. They both ate up the screen. It's like they're almost fighting for the scenery. And it's, I don't know who had the upper hand on the other. I think they both did. I think both Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins held their own against each other very well. They made for a very, very intriguing duo. They were very well matched. And other than the performances and the characterization, the editing is very slick. There's a lot being thrown at us, but at the same time, it just all seems to not only come at us at a very quick rate, but it never feels rushed. It feels like it moves the film along at a very brisk pace without losing any of the minute details that might have been taken away from the film if they weren't put across as well. The editing kind of reminded me of Morales' other film, City of God. There's the opening sequence where the kid's running from the bunch of gangs, and it opens up with like some kind of butcher or marketer or whichever. I don't know exactly what the term was, but they're just preparing some chickens, and it shows them beheading the chickens and plucking the feathers off the chickens, and the chicken running away, and it just reminded me so much of that. Production design, there were a lot of recreations of actual landmarks, of actual famous settings, such as the Sistine Chapel, and they were all recreated at Cinecittà Studios in Rome. I remember when I went to Rome with my with my class from St. John's, it was our Discover New York class, and at the end of the class, we all got to go to Rome for about a week. It was a little study abroad, but how much time do we really focus on studying? Let's be honest. But one of the things that we got to visit was Cinecittà, and remember it and having that image of the film studio, of the studio lot, and then just seeing what they did with the recreation of the Sistine Chapel in the film, it almost felt like something was coming full circle. So I loved what they did with recreating everything. Everything felt so real. If you told me that, I would have thought that they filmed on location. Because I remember seeing them walk into the Sistine Chapel, and I'm thinking to myself, and the first thought I had was, wow, how'd they get permits to film the Sistine Chapel? I had to sneak a picture when I went. But then I realized, okay, no, there has to be something else here, and it turns out they redesigned the actual Sistine Chapel. So, in terms of awards contention, I think it definitely has the potential to contend for Best Picture. Adapted screenplay for Anthony McCartan is based on a play that he wrote. Best Actor for Jonathan Pryce for playing Pope Francis. Supporting Actor for Anthony Hopkins for playing Pope Benedict. Hopefully film editing. It hasn't been getting as many editing award nominations or anything like that, but I think it would definitely deserve a nomination. And production design, just what they did for recreating all of these famous famous religious landmarks, famous religious settings. That I think it could do. I think it deserves a production design nomination, even though it's a more contemporary piece. So, to wrap things up with this, blessed with terrific performances from Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins, as well as Anthony McCartan's engaging screenplay, The Two Popes is a captivating speculation of the debate for the direction of the Catholic Church, not only between two of its most influential figures, but also for the 1.2 billion believers the Church seeks to serve. I'm going to give The Two Popes a 95. Okay, so the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences recently released a number of shortlists for several of their category nominations. So after the films that they released on the short list, they're going to select a few to be nominated, and those end up being the eventual nominees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my final Oscar nomination predictions for the minor categories at the Academy Awards. Now this includes, stuff that like all the artistic design, like production design, costume design, technical categories such as cinematography, editing, sound, and music. So I'm just going to get right into it. I'm going to start with Best Makeup. There has been a change in the category from 3 to 5 nominees, which I think honestly is a good move because there have just been 3 nominees in this category for a very long time, and there have been so many movies each year that I think had or at least deserved a nomination based on its makeup, and it seems a little weird that out of all the other categories had at the very least 5 nominees consistently, this was the only one that consistently had 3. So I'm happy they made this change. There are definitely a lot of contemporary pieces in here, a lot of non-fantastical pieces. There are definitely, it seems to be, at least in my eyes, the contenders seem to be films centering around real life characters. So my predicted nominees for Best Makeup are Bombshell, Dolomite Is My Name, Downton Abbey, Joker, and Judy. Now for costume design, there seems to be a good mix as far as what can contend. Again, more contemporary, more period pieces, but it's a lot of great. There's a lot of great costume design across the year in this sport. And it's not something I follow nearly as much, but I've been coming more and more into it. So my predicted nominees for costume design are Dolomite Is My Name, A Hidden Life, The Irishman, Little Women, and Rocket Man. Okay, so moving forward in terms of production design, definitely a lot of very ambitious productions, a lot of, very, very well-acclaimed set decorations. There's 1917, which a lot of people are saying that it feels so much like, an actual war-torn town, an actual war-torn area. And then, of course, like I said, there's the Two Popes, which the recreation of so many religious landmarks. That I think that, to me personally, that stands out. And then, of course, there's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. One of the best things about the movie was the production design, how it had such a loving affection for how it recreated 1960s Hollywood. Like this, it had this very nostalgic feel for it. And I think those in the Academy who tend to be wrapped up on nostalgia when it comes to film, they're going to eat that up. So my predicted nominees for Best Production Design are 1917, The Lighthouse, Little Women, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and The Two Popes. Now, moving on to the sound categories. So my predicted nominees for Best Sound Mixing are 1917, Avengers Endgame, Ford v Ferrari, Joker, and Rocket Man. And my predicted nominees for Best Sound Editing are 1917, Ad Astra, Avengers Endgame, Ford v Ferrari, and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Okay, so now for Best Visual Effects, this is another category where the Academy released its short list and narrowed it down to 10 films. Of course, out of those 10, 5 will be picked. And something I want to note, I want to just give a shout out for, Cats somehow made it onto the Academy short list for Best Visual Effects, when the visuals for the film, as I mentioned before, weren't even completed before the final cut. How that happened, I have no idea. I'm sure there are a bunch of other films that came out this year more deserving of the honor for Best Visual Effects than Cats that actually didn't make it onto the list. But without ranting for too long, there have honestly been a lot of groundbreaking work with visual effects. Of course, you have the de-aging technology in The Irishman. Some people seem to really love what they did with it. Some people weren't as crazy about it. I think for what they were trying to achieve, I think it worked. It worked very well, at least in my eyes. And of course, you have The Lion King, the groundbreaking special effects. No matter what you thought of the emotion of the movie, with how it compares to the original, you can't deny that these visual effects are absolutely groundbreaking. Did it hurt sometimes with the emotiveness of the animals? I think so. In certain scenes, it definitely did. But the fact that these animals just look so photorealistic, it looks like you're watching, a nature documentary. And I loved how, with The Lion King, you had such this intense story with these animals that just look so realistic. It just bumped up the intensity for me. But without further ado, my predicted nominees for Best Visual Effects are Alita Battle Angel, Avengers Endgame, The Irishman, The Lion King, and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Now, film editing. This is something where usually war movies tend to do pretty well. A lot of times long movies, believe it or not, tend to do pretty well in this category. Titanic at over 3 hours and 14 minutes long, won Best Film Editing. Avatar, almost 3 hours long, won Best Film Edit, was nominated for Best Film Editing. Lord of the Rings, all three films, at least 3 hours apiece, were either nominated or won for Best Film Editing. So that's why, going on that logic alone, that's why I think The Irishman, even though that movie's over 3.5 hours, and some people have complained about the length, I personally didn't think that there was anything in there that I would chop out. And what I will say is that the editing, much like with the Two Popes, the editing in here was very slick. It was very fast paced, and it helped prevent the film from dragging, which I think, again, at 3.5 hours long, that's something that's very, very hard to accomplish. So without further ado, my predicted nominees for Best Film Editing are 1917, Ford v. Ferrari, The Irishman, Parasite, and Uncut Gems. Okay, so for Best Cinematography, there are definitely a few standouts this year. With 1917, Roger Deakins, the DP of that, probably the most well-regarded working DP today. The film, of course, does that one-shot illusion, and especially with a war film, that's something that's very hard to accomplish. Of course, they did that with Birdman, but that was mostly a dark comedy set in like one setting. It wasn't a huge landscape that the story needed to work with. But so I think with something like 1917, and again, I haven't seen this, but again, I'm just going based mostly off word of mouth. But I think doing something like that, the one-shot illusion with a war film, I think that amount of ambition alone deserves some recognition. And from what I hear, they pulled off very, very well. And there's The Lighthouse, which I remember watching that, and I couldn't help but notice just how ambitious the entire film production process was for that entire movie, and to get the imagery that they did with the conditions that they had, that the film depicts, I think is absolutely insane. And then, of course, again, there's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Robert Richardson, if I'm not mistaken, did the cinematography on that one. And then that one, again, makes the most of nostalgic 1960s Hollywood. That's, like I said, the Academy is a sucker for that stuff. They're going to eat that up. So my predicted nominees for Best Cinematography are 1917, The Irishman, Joker, The Lighthouse, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now here's where we get into the music categories. For original song, they released a short list, and there are a few notables in the mix. Of course, Beyonce's in there. Everyone in Hollywood loves Beyonce. Elton John's in the mix. He's got a couple of great contenders. The film The Lion King has a couple songs that made the short list. I'm not sure if both of them are getting in there. I feel like both of them might, considering the pedigree that's behind them. There's Never Too Late and Spirit. I personally think that Never Too Late is a better song than Spirit, but like I said, everyone in Hollywood loves Beyonce. I wouldn't be surprised if Never Too Late gets knocked out for Spirit, or gets knocked out in favor of Spirit in terms of something else. But if I had to pick one song that could possibly replace one of the Lion King songs, it's probably Speechless from Aladdin. There was a lot of praise behind that song, so I could see that getting in there if one of the other ones gets knocked out. So my predicted nominees for Best Original Song are Glass of Soju from Parasite, I'm Gonna Love Me Again from Rocketman, Into the Unknown from Frozen 2, Never Too Late from The Lion King, and Spirit from The Lion King. Original score. There are a lot of great scores this year, and there are a few very notable people in the mix. You have Randy Newman. He did the score for Marriage Story. Thomas Newman, who did the score for 1917. You also have the score for Joker and Us that were done by two relatively small names, at least at that time, but I'm hoping that after this year or after these films are done running the film festival circuit, that these two composers get more name recognition and get more work down the line. Then, of course, you have franchise films such as Avengers Endgame. That score was composed by Alan Silvestri, who did the scores for Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, and then you have Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. It's a Star Wars film, so of course it's going to contend for music. John Williams is a living legend. I don't know if those last two will get in there, but if one of the other nominees that I predict fall out, then my money is on either Avengers or Star Wars getting in there in place. But to cap things off, my predicted nominees for Best Original Score are 1917, The Farewell, Joker, Marriage Story, and Us. So, to end things off today, we are going to review Little Women. For those of you who aren't familiar with the iconic novel, Little Women follows the coming of age of four young women in the duration and the aftermath of the American Civil War. And this shows just all the trials and errors that come with their growing up, with their trying to make it by in the absence of their father, who's fighting for the Union Army in the war. And this film has an incredible amount of pedigree behind it. You have Greta Gerwig writing and directing the film. You have a stacked cast that includes Saoirse Ronan, Florence Pugh, Timothy Chalamet, Emma Watson, Laura Dern, Meryl Streep, Chris Cooper. I feel like there's maybe one or two big names that I'm forgetting, but I think all the actors and actresses that I just mentioned are reason enough that they've assembled quite an ensemble here. So what I will say about this film, just to start things off, is that I thought this is absolutely wonderful. This, now keep in mind, I never read the book, so I'm gonna review this to the best of my ability, because I'm sure there are a lot of people wondering out there, like, how does that add up to the book? Does it pay respect to the book? I got tickets for my mom and my sisters for this film for Christmas. And my mom has always loved the book. She's loved it since she was a child. And based on what she's told me, and she loved it. She absolutely loved it. And I feel that if it didn't pay enough respect to the book, if it wasn't like the book enough, then she wouldn't have been as crazy about it, considering how invested she's been in the book since her childhood. So I'm going to trust her judgment on that one. So what I will say is that Greta Gerwig at the helm, she knocks it out of the park yet again. I think she did a terrific job with Lady Bird. And at least with this film, you could definitely see that she cares a lot about all the stories going into it. One thing that I love is that there's so many different storylines and character arcs and emotions going on in this film, and not once does the film ever feel overstuffed, and never feels like it's meandering, and never feels aimless. And I think to have so much going on, and think about it too, like Little Women is, of course, a long book, it's a big book, and to have so many of those stories just streamlined into one film narrative arc, for it to come off the way it does, and for it to work the way it does, I think that's something to celebrate. I think that she should be very proud of what she did. Overall, I think this film is definitely better than Lady Bird. This movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I can't say it ever felt over long, and like I said, it definitely never feels overstuffed. So I think with as much going on as it does, and for it to feel the way that it does, I think that's something to remember. I think, and keep in mind, this is my first exposure to this story. I'd always walked in every now and then on my mom and my sisters watching the other Little Women adaptations. But this being my first story, I couldn't help but notice just how invested I was in each and every single character, in each and every single part of the story. Well, another thing that works very well in this film, that honestly stands out so much, are the performances across the board. Like I said, there is a huge ensemble that was put together for Little Women this time around. And even amongst all these people that all, hold their own very well, they all do what they have to do and then some, there are a few performances that stand out. One of them is Saoirse Ronan, the lead role. She plays Jo March. Now, Saoirse Ronan and Greta Gerwig previously worked on Lady Bird, and Saoirse Ronan, the role that she plays in Lady Bird is kind of similar to the role that she plays in Little Women. These two characters, Jo March and Christine McPherson, I believe that's her name, in Lady Bird, these two characters are both these very fiery, very free-spirited young women that kind of just want to break out from their lives and go on to bigger and better things. And even though that these characters are very similar, these two characters that Saoirse Ronan played, they never once feel like she's doing the same thing. Florence Pugh as the spoiled youngest sister, I think she does very well. Timothy Chalamet as one of the main love interests. He plays Theodore Lawrence, or he's called Laurie throughout the film. I think he does very well. He brings a lot of layers. He brings a kind of like quirky and kind-hearted, but also very passionate portrayal of Laurie. There isn't a weak link in this entire film. Another thing that stands out to me as well, of course, other than the musical score is great, the artistic design, the production, the sets, the costume design, they're all spectacular. They're absolutely spectacular, and they're just yet another element of the film that helped bring me into the world of the film, that helped me keep more and more invested into everything that was going on the screen. So, if there's one thing that I wasn't as crazy about with the film, was that it kind of switches back and forth between one point in the lives of the March family and another point in the lives of the March family. And at first it was a bit jarring and a tiny bit confusing, but it recovers itself very well, because I noticed that between each different time period, there was a very, very slight difference in the lighting or the color palette in each time setting. And it walks a very tricky tightrope of being just noticeable enough so that you get it, like, okay, we're now in this time period as opposed to this time period, without it being too obnoxious. It's very subtle, but it's communicated very well, that time jump. So that was something that I thought, oh man, is this going to bother me throughout the film? But no, it pulls itself back up very, very well. In terms of awards consideration, I think this could definitely contend, and should definitely contend across the board. Best Picture, Director and Adapted Screenplay for Greta Gerwig, Actress for Saoirse Ronan, Supporting Actress for Florence Pugh. In a less competitive year for Supporting Actor, Timothy Chalamet. And then, of course, artistic design, production, costume design. I'm sure music, original score is going to contend somehow, even though I just predicted otherwise. But again, I could be wrong. Alexander Desplat's, he did the score. He always gets in there somehow. But no, this, across the board, this is a very, very well done film. It was absolutely wonderful, and I didn't think I wouldn't enjoy it, but I thought I would like it, but I didn't think I'd like it this much. I thought this would be, of course, more of a chick flick, and it probably is more of a chick flick at its core, but it has more to offer than that, and I was very pleasantly surprised at that. So to wrap this up, Greta Gerwig's Little Women is a sensitive, poignant, and elegant adaptation of the iconic novel that shows a deep respect for the source material and is chock full of fine performances and dazzling artistic design. I'm going to give Little Women another 95. Alright, well, there you have it. Just like that, there goes the second episode of Real Talk. If you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, any topics that you could think of being discussed on the show, or even just questions that you have to me, or for me, don't be afraid to reach out to me on any of my social media handles. They should be in the description for whatever platform that this podcast is actually uploaded on. In terms of the uploading schedule, as I mentioned in the first episode, things are kind of up in the air because of Christmas Day and New Year's. So, but starting this coming Wednesday, that's when episode 3 is set to premiere. Starting with episode 3, every episode after that should premiere every Wednesday. And just like that, that's it. That's the end of the show. I hope you had a great time. I hope I'm getting better at being your host. So until next time, this has been Real Talk.